Film Trace. This is a podcast where we trace the life of a film from conception to production, all the way to release and reception. Season 4, episode 5. Am I right about that, Chris?
You're right. It's the midway point of the new season.
Woof. Yeah, and this is we kind of took a mini break here because I really wanted to do this movie. Picking new movies is kind of tough now because it's just like there's a lot going on. There's some stuff on streaming, some stuff in cinema. It's hard to sort of pick and choose what's going on. But this one I felt like we had to do. No Sudden Move, the new crime thriller from the one and only Steven Soderbergh, that is getting released or was just released here on July 1st in the United States on HBO Max. So a streaming film. I have not. I mean, first of all, before we dive into the movie, I think we really have to talk about Steven Soderbergh and like our personal relationship with him. In terms of like, because he's one of those directors that became famous when we were teenagers. And so we probably went to go see his movies when we were 16, 17 years old. I think they were very formative, a lot of them. And he is a prolific person. And he's been, incredibly active over the last 20 years plus. So I'm kind of interested to how you came to this movie, what your feelings are about Steven Soderbergh. Love him, hate him, somewhere in between probably. Like, how do you feel about him?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's definitely somewhere in between. I think if you had asked me that like in 2003, I would have been like, the man can do no wrong. But it's just, the man's just done so much. And it's not, I've tried my best, over the years to like distance myself from being too like auteur focused, because he's the kind of, for better or worse, auteur that doesn't really have any interest in being an auteur, right? Yeah. Like he just wants to work. Like he's just wants to constantly make movies, make them the way he wants. And he's also like very independent. This movie, just like several of his others in recent past, was made pretty quickly. He shot it, he edited it under his pseudonyms, Peter Andrews and Marianne Bernard, respectively. But for the most part, it's like he has built this well-oiled machine, and he'll do like maybe something a little bit new and different, but definitely never doing anything drastically innovative compared to what he's done before, right? Yeah. Like I think the last probably innovative thing he's done career-wise is like when he started using an iPhone to make movies. Other than that, it's just like, just like crank them out.
What about the cool lenses in this, Chris?
Man.
That's the one thing I noticed when you start watching this, your eyes are not going crazy. He used, I can't remember what exactly it was. It's like vintage lenses that he found.
Yeah.
You'll notice that, like, I don't know the technical terms because I'm not a filmmaker, but like how it stuck out to me, I was just watching a scene, and then the peripheral, it's almost like they're stretched out. Right. And so it's almost like a fish eye sort of thing going on. How would you describe it?
Yeah, it's like fisheye on, but only on the left and right. Yeah. Right. Like it's annoying enough that you definitely notice it, especially in the more boring parts of the movie, or anytime obviously a character walks from the left of the frame to the right or back or vice versa. But I don't know. It's just like he's having fun. It did remind me of how we talked about Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead, where it's like he clearly wanted to just like play with a whole bunch of old vintage stuff. And whereas Zack Snyder's more maximalist, Soderbergh's maybe more minimalist, and he like just picked this one lens. But because he picked that one lens, it's like distractingly ubiquitous throughout the film. Yeah. Except for the parts where I think the movie actually works, and you can actually like kind of see why he chose it. But it's just strange that he chose it for the entirety. It makes a lot more sense to me anyways, or it makes you be able to disappear into the movie more when, like, I don't know, Wes Anderson does something silly, like uses different aspect ratios for different time periods. But like if the movie's good enough and you sink into the story, then those things are like a cool Easter egg that you notice on the second or third viewing, but definitely not on the first.
Yeah.
But here it's just kind of, it's in your face, and but he doesn't care. I don't think.
No, he's so far past caring. I mean, this guy hasn't cared since 2002. I mean, he remade Solaris. I mean, who does that? You can't do that. So let's talk a little bit about what this thing is about. So No Sudden Move. I would call it. Would you call it noir? Yeah. Right. It's in that genre.
I mean, it's and we're gonna get into this, I'm sure, but let's put it out front. Especially since I feel like a lot of the film universe is talking about this. Criterion just put out a new neo-noir collection on their streaming service. Do we think that we can call this neo-noir even though it takes place in the 50s?
That's fine. That's because I was just watching one today with Robert Meacham. I forget what it's called. Farewell Something. Yeah, if it's set in the 50s, that one's set in the 40s. That's totally fine. It's still neo-noir.
Because it was made in modern day.
Yeah, made in modern day. And then, it's obviously like trying to harken back to that time period, but it can't, right? You can't go back into the past. So there's always this sort of postmodernist, whatever you want to call it, sheen to everything that's going on. This one is, what's interesting about this one, there does not seem to be a lot of, I wouldn't call it playfulness. Maybe in the production, the editing and stuff like that, but in the storytelling itself, it seems pretty rote. I mean, the log line here, set in 1954 Detroit, No Sudden Move centers on a group of small-time criminals who are hired to steal what they think is a simple document. When their plan goes horribly wrong, they seek out who hired them and for what ultimate purpose as they weave through the race-torn, rapidly changing city. The thing that stood out to me the most is how genre-y this movie is. I just did not think that it's like he settled on this pretty simple idea, and when we dive into the conception, we can talk about that a little bit more. Simple concept, simple idea, and he just runs with it and lets Don Cheadle. Speaking of which, this stars Don Cheadle, Benicio del Toro, David Harbour, John Hamm, Brendan Fraser, Kieran Culkin, Amy Seimetz. There's Julia Fox, Ray Liotta, Matt Damon shows up. It's like one of those all-star cast movies, which is kind of one of his calling cards, thinking back to the Ocean's movies. But it is I think a fairly straightforward crime thriller noir. Would you agree with that in terms of like the plot structure and kind of what's happening?
Yeah, it's like it's very nuts and bolts. Doesn't really feel like it doesn't have the as many of the comedic elements as the Ocean's movies did or Logan Lucky. But it also like doesn't have this like fierce darkness to it really that The Limey did, which is my personal favorite Soderbergh movie. So it kind of fills this space. I mean, a lot of people have been comparing it to Out of Sight, which is also one of my favorite Soderberghs. But you really don't have there's no romance going on in it. I mean, there's definitely, it's a stacked cast, and so there's definitely interesting things happening here and there, but I mean, I don't. I once again, I'm just going to be as blunt as I can be. Like, I was all on board for this movie up until the criminals played by Cheadle, Del Toro, and Culkin, till they took their masks off. Basically, when that happened, I just
the first 15 minutes of the
I know, but like the first 15 minutes of this movie are so freaking good.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying. I see where you're going, but it's like it's a classic setup though. The heist gone wrong. I mean, it's like every noir film. I mean, he definitely like you could go through as you're watching this and spot, Chinatown, The Third Man. Like it all pops up over and over again. So it's definitely like he wanted to stay within the guardrails of a genre that's very, very well established and has been for 70 years. Before we dive into the conception, I mean, let's talk about Soderbergh, because some people who are younger may not know him all that well. How did you first, what was your first sort of experience with him?
It was probably Out of Sight in 98. Jackie Brown, which is not Soderbergh, it's Tarantino, but both of those films are based off Elmore Leonard novels. And when Jackie Brown came out, I read Rum Punch, which is the Leonard novel it was based on. And then I heard, I don't remember how did we hear about things in the 90s? I don't remember. In terms of, film development.
For this, you probably read an Entertainment Weekly.
Yeah, exactly. I read something. Yeah, it was probably like one of those fall movie previews or something. And it was like Out of Sight from director Steven Soderbergh, based on an Elmore Leonard novel. And so I got hyped for it. And then, of course, when I saw that, I was obsessed and wanted to, especially because they actually shared a character. Both Jackie Brown and Out of Sight have Michael Keaton playing the, I think, FDA agent. Not FDA. Oh my God. DEA agent. Yeah. FDA. That'd be better. And, and so then I went back and looked at what Soderbergh had done leading up to Out of Sight. And obviously he is probably one of the biggest 90s filmmakers, known for essentially like just being scrappy and sticking around until he was able to make his first feature, Sex, Lives, and Videotape, and then it blew up on the film festival circuit. It won the Palme d'Or at Cannes. It earned Academy Award nomination for Best Original Screenplay, and so I immediately sought that out. And I remember feeling kind of like dirty as like a 15-year-old going to like riding my bicycle to the nearest like independent video store and like looking for Sex, Lies, and Videotape, and like, yeah, it was weird. But then as soon as I saw that, and like that definitely changed my idea of like what movies could be, because you could tell how like low budget it was and how much it was like a play, but also like the camera angles were so specific and deliberate, and I think that was like a huge eye opening for me. Ironically, though, like when after like rewatching Out of Sight over and over again, and then seeing The Limey and watching Sex, Lies, and Videotape, like I never really saw any of his other 90s movies.
Yeah.
I've never seen King of the Hill, Underneath, Grey's Anatomy, Schizopolis. But I would definitely like started making sure to see every Soderbergh movie after that. Actually, I still haven't seen Ocean's 13 now that I think about it.
I think you don't need to.
Yeah,
that's
probably not.
a required viewing.
How about you, Dan?
I have a weird sort of, I guess, relationship with Soderbergh. I think the first movie I saw of him was The Limey. And I feel like I saw it with one of you guys. Somebody from high school. You were there, Hendrix. And I don't remember if we saw it in the theater. I think we got a Blockbuster. It was probably The Limey. I saw The Limey right around when Traffic came out. So Traffic is probably the first one I saw of his movies in the theater, and that blew me away. Like that to me was like, as like, how old was I? 17 probably then. It was beyond any sort of movie telling that I've seen before, storytelling, I should say. It just was a different type of making a film. And also getting like a wide release, which is super surprising. It blew me away, and I've never seen Out of Sight. I have never seen Sex, Lies, and Videotape.
What?
I've never seen anything he's done in the 90s besides The Limey, which I didn't like, by the way, when I saw it.
What?
Yeah.
Have you seen it since then?
I have not gone back and seen it. I should, because I'm super noir films these days, and it kind of has that vibe to it. But yeah, so I loved Traffic. Aaron Brockovich too, I saw back in the day. It's so hard to like, after like reviewing Soderbergh's kind of career, it is a really fascinating career, because he basically starts out hitting a grand slam with Sex, Lies, and Videotape. Kind of doesn't disappear, but disappears from, I would say, like sort of the mainstream press until Out of Sight comes out in 1998. And then he kind of, that's another sort of a big win for him. Limey's was definitely very quiet, as you remember. Maybe a lot of end of the year lists, but like that was not a big hit or anything like that.
It had to have been a limited release.
I think so. Yeah, it's like an art house movie, and then
I saw it at like a downtown theater,
like Oriental or something.
Yeah.
And then Aaron Brockovich and Traffic come out, and he gets nominated for a director twice that year, I think, and wins for Traffic. So with the first 10 years of his career, he's been up and down, and it's kind of been the same story with him ever since then. Traffic, I think, was one of my favorite films. I dread going back and revisiting it. I have not watched it in like a decade. I don't know if I want to. I don't know if I briefly caught it on TV or HBO or something, like a little segment. I was like, oh wow, this is really affected. The different colors for the different characters, it was like a little much. So I might go back and watch, but that was definitely a pivotal film in sort of my understanding of filmmaking and art and stuff like that. Then I saw Solaris. Hendrix actually forced me to watch that at his house once. And I was
yes, our Hollywood insider
yes,
guest appeared on our The Fountain
he
episode.
did, yes,
Yep.
and that blew me away even more than Traffic. And people hate that film, and I get that.
I don't understand why.
It's a very difficult film. And I've never seen the original. I know, but I thought it was wonderful. And then I had a really interesting moment with Soderbergh, actually. So I was living in San Francisco. Che was coming out. Che 1 and 2. This is 2009. This is biopic of Che Guevara, and two parts, like 6 hours long, super arty. And I read an interview with him, and he said something like, and I just took it the wrong way. Maybe it was like, no one needs an education. You don't need to go to college, blah, blah, blah. It's pointless. Okay. I was like, okay, that's a strong stance, odd. And then I went to go see all of Che all at once, like a full screening of it, and somewhere in San Francisco. And it was terrible.
Mm-hmm.
It was absolutely boring. Like I fell asleep. And, since then, I haven't really followed what he's been up to. I've never seen Girlfriend Experience, never seen The Informant. Contagion is one of my favorite movies, but only because it's like super nerdy, not because it's a good movie, because it's not. Magic Mike is wonderful, super fun. It's just, for me, it's just been very up and down. I am blown away by what he has accomplished and what he has done for filmmaking and directing. And he has a lot of really great films. It's just, they're not all, it's not like Wes Anderson. Like when Wes Anderson makes a movie, I'm going to like it on some level. That's not the case with Soderbergh. He is not that curated with his time and what he's doing in his projects. He just goes for it constantly. He's go, 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 go. And so with this one, I was interested mostly because he wasn't going to do something crazy. I kind of felt like he was going to do like a hard-boiled, crime thriller. And so I was pretty excited about it. Where does this thing come from? Who's the writer on this? Who's Ed Solomon?
Yeah, that was a really, I had to do a double take when I checked the writing credit right before I watched it, because I was like, what? And that might have been like playing with expectations. So yes, Ed Solomon, somebody that Soderbergh has only collaborated with once before, and it was on TV. A TV show I'd never heard of from 2017 called Mosaic
on HBO. It had Pee Wee Herman in it. What's his name?
Paul Rubens. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Nobody saw it.
But yeah, everybody I think would know Solomon way more for writing some of the most successful and iconic films of the 80s and 90s, as well as several episodes of one of Gary Shandling's shows in the 80s, and Laverne and Shirley in the 80s too. But he did the first. Actually, he's done all three Bill and Ted films.
And I think a new one too. Okay, yes, he did all three of them.
Right. The Super Mario Brothers movie, it's iconic for a bad reason, but still kind of a crazy resume. And then Men in Black, Charlie's Angels, the first one, and then both Now You See Me movies. It's just like, what the hell? How did this guy do all of this stuff and then team up with Soderbergh for a neo-noir that just seems so out of left field? And I think that perhaps played with my expectations, because I was honestly expecting something a lot more playful than what we got, like you kind of alluded to earlier. And it's kind of unfortunate, in my opinion, because I love the Bill and Ted movies, and even the Now You See Me movies are trash, just complete utter trash, but they are so fun to watch. So I thought this would be at least fun to watch. But then it's just like I don't remember the last time Soderbergh has been fun either. I never saw what's that movie, Let Them All Talk or whatever from last year. Yeah. But supposedly that's the most playful he's been, perhaps, since other than Logan Lucky. I don't know. I think it just totally depends on the cast. And I love Benicio del Toro. I've never really been a huge Don Cheadle fan. But I think with that duo, like, you either got to let them go hog wild, otherwise they're just going to be understated And they definitely went the understated route here. Kieran Culkin is huge for me because of his character on Succession and having the movie come out on HBO Max. It's just like, it feels like, where did this movie change from like perhaps an exciting idea where Soderbergh and Solomon decided to come back together, along with producer Casey Silver, in the vein, like they were literally thinking about the Ocean's films, including the fact that Clooney was originally attached to this movie back when it was called Kill Switch in the early stages. So like, where do you think, like, I mean, I think you liked the movie more than I did, but where did the fun go, Dan? This seems like it was in a perfect powder keg for that.
What's bizarre to this is in multiple interviews, Solomon calls it like the cousin of one of the Ocean's movies. And I don't really get that comparison at all, because the Ocean's movies they're definitely not noir films at all. They're heist movies, which is more like what is that, Rafifi I'm thinking of? And even that's not playful. Like the Ocean's movies just have a very breezy vibe to them. This has no breezy vibe. This is like a stark, super dark, you can't win vibe. And it was funny that I was just sort of thinking about this, now it's just popping into my head. Because in one of the interviews, Solomon talks about, let's make a really sparse, really spare 70s style noir film. That's three criminals who've never met before and just do a gig and it goes drastically wrong. A very classical kind of noir setup. But the key there is the 70s style. And like, you're going to hate that I'm bringing this up, but Quentin Tarantino was on Joe Rogan. And, he brought up this point about the difference between 70s filmmaking and 80s filmmaking. And he brings it's a really fascinating analogy between Chevy Chase and Bill Murray. It's just, you go watch that part, don't watch the rest. It's on a clip on YouTube somewhere. But I think one of the things that stood out to me with this film and the approach here is it's almost like, and I get the sense that Soderbergh he's not a huge planner, in the sense that like he probably went in with this idea. I want to do a Don Cheadle film. They have this really cool idea of doing it in the 1950s when the city's, the car manufacturers own the city essentially. And there's just a lot of racial tension. When is there not in the United States? But I mean, it was a special period of that. So they have this really elaborate sort of setup. Do you think this? I'm going to throw this question back at you. Do you think they had thought the tone was going to be more light and breezy when they started this? And like Steven sort of like altered it as they went along? I just get the sense that he just kind of goes with whatever's in his bones.
Right. I mean, I'm curious to go back and look at this mosaic project that Solomon and Soderbergh worked on together. I don't know what the tone was there, but if you're calling it a cousin of the Ocean's movies, and this is the guy that made Out of Sight as well, plus Logan Lucky, which was also a heist movie, it's just it might be an expectations game, because one thing that I did appreciate about the movie is like the kind of it had more meat on its bones thematically. It was fascinating to kind of learn sideways about the kind of exploitative redlining that was happening in Detroit and how that affected Cheadle's character. He has an interesting quote about like, he wanted to just throw the audience in there. And so you don't know about who these people are. You learn as you go, rather than there being a lot of front loaded exposition, which is, I think that's a very solid strategy when it comes to a heist movie, a noir movie. Like you said, like he knew what he was doing, and I think Solomon did too, to some degree, even though this is his first kind of more serious project. Though you could argue that the Now You See Me films are also like essentially heist movies, just with magicians. And yet I still have to go back to is like, maybe like how much of this is also the pandemic. I don't want to put everything through that lens, but like they wanted to get this done and they pushed it through. And like, that's the reason they lost Clooney, is because Clooney is like, I've got an asthmatic kid. I'm not going to risk it by going to make a movie and this was probably, you know, back in this, I don't know, the summer or something.
Yeah, I think it was just
of 2020 when, you know, the numbers were still crazy with COVID.
We were way before like the really scary part of COVID, which was probably in the fall and winter when the deaths started to rise all across the country dramatically. And it's funny you bring that up because Don Cheadle, in one of the interviews, I think from AP News, you know, I think Soderbergh basically says that Cheadle wasn't necessarily eager to return to a film set, and he kind of had to get you know, convinced by Soderbergh to do this, and Soderbergh paid for all this COVID testing out of pocket. But it is true though, it's like making a film in that type of environment is not necessarily going to lend itself to like a lot of collaboration, right? When you're talking to each other with masks on, when you're not shooting, it just it had to affect the filmmaking in some way.
And maybe that's where you get that tone, right? Is like you're not only withholding the communication piece somewhat, or you're kind of just getting through it, but you very much become a product of your environment. And if everybody's constantly getting tested for an airborne disease similar to one from a previous Soderbergh movie, like nobody's having fun there. Like it's going to give it this really kind of heavy, morose vibe, which, you know, depending on how the movie lands with you, could really make it that much more powerful. But for me, I wasn't there. And I don't know who really was. I think it was interesting also the strategy for release, which we'll get to more in a bit. But like the beginning of July, like right before a huge holiday weekend, something didn't feel right about it.
Yeah, that's a one thing too. Like when you looking back at the conception of this and sort of, you know, we sometimes talk about how movies get made and how, because it's very difficult to make a movie. Like it's not something, you know, raising $10 million, $20 million is an incredibly difficult task to do. And we talked about Shane Black, how he had all these ideas, but he could never raise money. It's a very common thing. Richard Kelly is probably another example of that. Just because you have great ideas and you have some sort of track record does not mean you're going to get $1 million from somebody. It doesn't happen that way. So something came together here with Steven and Casey Silver. They're really the glue here, and Ed Solomon was added a little bit later. But like, okay, let's do a hypothetical. I walk into the room. I'm Steven Soderbergh. I got a producer here. I've done a show for you guys, Mosaic. It's HBO. It's Warner Brothers, same company, right? And I lay down this concept. I almost think he did a switcheroo where he was like, hey, we're going to do another heist movie. Well, yeah, it's Steven. Steven does all these like great, really fun, interesting heist movies. Like Lucky Logan was cool. Financially did okay. But all the Ocean's movie did so well. If he gets like Josh Brolin or George Clooney, why do you greenlight something like this? Because here's what I'm saying is take out like the COVID stuff and the movie theater business kind of going under, at least temporarily, hopefully, exhibition or movie theaters at least. What was the sell here? Because if you told me, hey, we're going to make a hard-boiled noir film with Don Cheadle as the lead, John Cheadle's, he's, you know, a decent, what you call him, like more like B-list or A-list? Which I
mean, he's won the Best Actor Oscar, like the guy. But I do think it was like that was very much a right time, right place situation with Hotel Rwanda.
Would you say that he's a huge star?
He's not a huge star. No, if we're talking about like name recognition, yeah, like B-list.
Yeah, he's not like The Rock
or
something.
Which hurts to kind of say because everybody knows him. But yeah, you're right. He's like, it is kind of interesting that he wanted to make a movie with like a Don Cheadle vehicle.
Yeah, that was the impetus, right?
Yeah, because I don't think anybody's really done that since Hotel Rwanda, you know?
Yeah, like, he's always done kind of a side character kind of role. I mean, what do you think the selling point was to think like an HBO executive or Warner Brothers executive who you're thinking about money?
Well, yeah, I mean, we haven't really brought up this, but this is another one of those straight to streaming films where the production budget is nowhere to be found on
Nothing,
the internet,
yeah.
right? And with Soderbergh in particular, I mean, you make a good point here in our notes that Logan Lucky cost 29 million, but Magic Mike cost 7. So like that's a huge like gulf between the two films. And you know, this one is maybe a little more it's more ensemble, and like Magic Mike, you basically just had Channing Tatum, who was still like nascent in his career, but Matthew McConaughey. Logan Lucky, like you had Channing Tatum, but you didn't have really that many other big names. Like you've got a lot of names here, but like they're all, and Matt Damon's unbilled, so he's doing this probably
For, like, scale or something?
Yeah, for scale. And so you're really not spending a lot on the cast, even with like David Harbour from Stranger Things, John Hamm from Mad Men. Like there, it adds up. But like I don't know. What would you say? I'm guessing this is maybe 15.
I would say like 15 to 20. Yeah.
Yeah.
You got like the period piece part of it too is a little bit difficult.
Right. A lot of production design.
Got Brendan Fraser. How'd they afford him?
Oh man, I mean but that's definitely like when it comes to these kinds of marketing things.
Yeah.
Like for a straight to streaming movie, especially I mean, who knows what they were thinking the landscape would be like, but they're definitely not advertising this like they were the Conjuring movie or even the Mortal Kombat movie, right?
No,
like
this is like I think a very specific demographic. I mean, us. Like,
exactly.
It's made for like people who are
for
like,
the podcasters,
like 30s, 40s, like millennial, older, younger Gen Xer or something. And but I just financially doesn't make any sense. But we're kind of in la la land when it comes to finances in movies, because like it's essentially a content race, arms race.
Yes.
And it's like you got to get the best content. It doesn't matter if it's good or bad. Just get it, get eyeballs on it, and keep your subscribers from leaving. It's like reducing churn rates is really what it's all about.
Yeah, and Soderbergh has a funny quote about how he it's somewhat unclear whether he's being sarcastic, but he refers to himself as the cockroach of the industry. Oh, yeah. Right, where like he just keeps surviving no matter how many like non-hits he makes. Like he really hasn't had a hit, right, since probably Magic Mike.
Yeah, that's
and even that wasn't a huge hit, right?
No, I don't think it was a massive hit.
It was huge enough to merit a sequel, but like other than that, it's like the Ocean's movies. Like I feel like a lot of people probably expected after Ocean 13 he would just continue making these kind of star-studded things, but also like there's interesting like there's some people that believe that the Ocean's movies was basically the end of like the adult movie star era.
Really?
Right?
I've never heard this theory before. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that theory a lot.
Yeah. Right? Because like after the 2000, like Ocean's 13 was what, 07?
Yeah.
And then like, can you think of any, like then, Iron Man was 2008, and then it's just like, it's all for kids after that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Those big budget movies. So, I mean, it definitely seems like long story short that essentially he probably has just had this long working relationship with HBO between Mosaic and Let Them All Talk and Behind the Candelabra. And so it was probably just like standing invite, like, oh, we've got this meeting with Soderbergh. Can you make it for under 20? Oh yeah, no problem. Great.
Yeah.
Make it for us. Content farm. Yeah.
Exactly. He's got the names attached. That's the most important thing.
Exactly.
Like he's got John Hamm. He's got it's everybody's in this movie essentially. What is so let's talk about like the release here. We're kind of transitioning, talking about streaming only. A question that popped in my head was that like, did they must have greenlit this before COVID hit, right? Had to have.
Yeah.
Did they expect this to play in theaters? I mean, like, how?
They limited, I guess, because like I think Logan Lucky had a wide.
It did have wide, yeah.
That was, but then like Unsane was definitely limited. Yeah. I don't even know what the Laundromat is from 2019.
Meryl Streep, Netflix. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So like, yeah, I mean, it seemed like with the I mean, Side Effects was not a huge hit, was it?
No, definitely not. It was on like every
Yeah.
DVD like shelf for rental. Remember that back in the day? Or so, it was like
Yeah.
everywhere, and like nobody wanted to watch it.
Right.
And you're like, okay.
So I think it's just been a lot of like you said, he's had a turbulent decade, and so they probably were expecting it to be. That's my guess anyway. What do you think? Limited, and then
Yeah, probably art house.
yeah.
But that sort of, if I'm in their seat, I'd be like, well, if I'm going to release this in theater, it's got to be in October. It's got to be October,
Right.
November. It cannot be in the summer. That makes zero sense.
Or even in the spring. Like I don't think they would really.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
It's not really an awards push, but it's definitely not a summer movie. But I also think like I don't know, The Limey came out in the summer, so
yeah, but that was kind of
who knows?
Financially not a great situation.
Right. Yeah.
How did critics think about this? I mean, like 88% on Rotten Tomatoes, 75 score.
I mean, like you said, it's catnip for the people that like have a wide ranging working background knowledge of not only Soderbergh as a careerist, but also of film noir, right?
Yeah.
So like, I feel like it's pretty fish in a barrel kind of thing, as long as they hit the beats. And that, I mean, that's one of the lead quotes you have here in our notes from Adam Graham, Detroit News, like hometown of where the movie takes place. He says, "No sudden move offers a look at a city in a period of transition and what that transition does to everyone around it. The big beats crackle, the smaller ones hang around like an aftershock. Don't be surprised if it ends up knocking you out." And G. Allen Johnson of the San Francisco Chronicle wrote, "Even as everyone's plans unravel, the film does not. The script by Ed Solomon is sharp, as is Soderbergh's direction." And last but not least, one last positive one to read off, David Rooney of Hollywood Reporter, "The film's title might adhere to the 1950s noir template." By the way, I hate the title, but the camera work and editing are full of sudden moves that contribute to the exhilarating storytelling. I find this strange. Exhilarating? Crackle?
I loved this film, and I agree with none of the positive reviews at all. I mean, the negative ones are more fun. This is no Ocean's 11. It's as dour and sluggish and deliberative as Soderbergh's other crime caper franchise is joyfully slick and stylish. It's Mark Kennedy from AP News. Yeah, I mean, like the New Yorker one's pretty brutal with Richard Brody, who I have a love-hate relationship with. The movie depends on a narrative shell game that withholds crucial information in the interest of stoking suspense, conjuring mystery, foregrounding visible action, and keeping a rapid pace. Soderbergh displays no interest in the character's experience, knowledge, and perspectives. Rather, they're reduced to roles in the plot, becoming pieces in the chess game that Soderbergh is playing for fun, while nonetheless proclaiming in the emblazoned themes of the adventure a grander significance. This is why I love Richard Brody, because like he's right. He's always right, even when he's wrong. And so he really hits the nail on the head. Like, this is essentially a paint by numbers crime thriller. That's what it is. Mm-hmm. It's a period piece. It's neo-noir. It has all these tags to it, but it follows the beats one by one. And there is filled with homage, just filled with it. The Matt Damon speech is like, feels straight out of Chinatown. That same bold, "I'm always going to win, you're always going to lose, here's why" speech. Right. But for me, for some reason, I kind of fall more, I think, in sort of the critical viewpoint of just maybe I'm a little bit of a fanboy. You know, maybe I love that genre so much that I don't need much more than Soderbergh, just, casually hitting those right notes at the right time. And I think for the casual viewer, and we see this in the audience scores, 64% on Rotten Tomatoes audience score.
Oof.
IMDb of 67. I had a Google. I like Google rating for some reason. I'm really fascinated by Google rating, like what that means. 69%, which is not high. I think you're definitely more on the sort of critical camp. Where is it missing with a mass audience here?
It's definitely feels like there's a like half I mean, because the audience is still like Film Twitter and Letterboxd, like, and the Letterboxd score is a little higher than than the other ones, a 70. But I think for the most part, I wonder, like you said, like if this had come out in the fall or if it came out in the spring, like people, I don't think, myself included, and I also am like a sucker for noir. I was just not feeling it for 4th of July weekend, and so I could definitely see myself revisiting this when I'm not having like a celebration with family, and maybe we've had a couple frigid days in a row, and I just curl up in the basement and just get like sucked into the narrative shell game, to use Brody's words, because that's the kind of thing that you want. Like you want this kind of technical exercise. That was another review I read somewhere, I forget where, which is what Soderbergh has kind of been perfecting over the years. And he was just trying it in through another lens. No pun intended, right? Yeah. He's trying to like do this thing, and he, like you said earlier, he doesn't care how far reaching the appeal is. Wow. He just wants to see if he can pull this thing off, which makes sense since he's been, reliable when it comes to the heist genre. Like can I pull this off? Can I get away with this? And some people eat it up like popcorn, yeah, like you. And whereas some people are just kind of like I wanted to see where it went, and like the acting was great, and the script had its moments, but at the end of it, I'm just feeling like, yeah, like what do I remember? Yeah. Like really, I mean, usually we do this show, we record like the day or two after, but because of the holiday weekend, I watched this in the middle of it, and a lot of stuff has happened since it's been like 3 or 4 days, and so like I'm trying to think back. I really remember the scene between Amy Semitz's character and the neighbor lady, where there's like some kind of slight insinuation that they are an item, that they're like having an affair and like they want to go on vacation together.
Oh yeah.
Like that was super fascinating, but also like just a morsel. Kieran Culkin, exasperatingly taking his mask off in the back of the car. Great moment, like just totally floored me. But like other than that, it just feels like another one where I'm like, huh, like I actually think I got more. Like I'm thankful for the movie because it got me reading about what was going on in Detroit in the 50s, and so like, thank you for bringing me to that Wikipedia rabbit hole, Soderbergh. But that was a much more nourishing and fulfilling than actually watching your movie. That was only like 5% actually about that stuff. I don't know.
What do you think that the cast had anything to do with? I kind of wonder the way that he cast it. It was almost overcast. Like everybody, every part felt like the person that was playing it was just almost too much. Like Ray Liotta, especially. It's just sort of like I don't know. Like Don Cheadle, I think, was great. Benicio del Toro is always good. I mean, he's never bad in something usually. David Harbour I thought was fantastic.
Yeah, that was really impressive.
I thought John Hamm was not very good.
No, he was phoning it in.
Yeah, he just didn't really seem. Yeah,
but also his character, like it was just the regular detective.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah. What do you think of Brendan Fraser's comeback here?
I literally didn't recognize him.
Yeah, he looks so different.
I remember I saw Brendan Fraser's name in the cast, and then I watched and like forgot to look for him. And so then when the movie's over and I see the credits roll again, I was like, wait, what the hell? Who was he? Yeah. And then I a quick Google search, but like, I feel like if I saw this movie before the internet, like I would have been like, wait, who the frick was Brendan Fraser playing? But I mean, it's good that he's back in our lives, but also like, I don't think there was much to it. Same thing with Julia Fox, who like blew everyone's mind away in Uncut Gems. and then is like given basically nothing here, but also like is kind of miscast too.
I would say a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know.
I thought Kieran Culkin was phenomenal and the little
Oh,
that
yeah.
he is in the movie. Not spoiler alert.
I know. I want to see him in a leading role.
Yeah, there's something about that guy. He's got something. So any final thoughts? Where do you think Soderbergh goes here? Is he just gonna like just keep doing this? Like just keep doing these like passion projects that are like semi business related in terms of making money, but not really. Like,
yeah, I
don't know.
I'm fascinated with the guy, even though I say that, and yet there's probably half his movie, maybe a little less than half his movies that I've actually seen at this point. But I don't know, what hasn't he done yet? Like,
he's done TV. He's done prestige TV.
Right. Oh yeah, The Nick. I'd like to. I think once again, like the heart of Out of Sight. Like the narrative experimentation in The Limey is amazing, in my opinion. But that romance in Out of Sight, and it's been a good minute since we've seen a really solid romance. I want to see him do that. I want to see him go for it.
I want to see him like make Contagion 2.
Oh God, of course he. Let's get more clinical.
Can we get more sterile? Like this whole thing. You know what he hasn't done is a horror movie, like a real, I guess, Unsane.
No, well, Unsane is a psychological thriller. Yeah, but yeah,
I want a Soderbergh slasher. Can he do Scream 6?
Yeah,
you would do it. He would totally sign up for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think my final take on it is like, look, I love it. I love this movie. I put it in my top 5 Soderbergh films. Did you see that?
Your top 5 Soderbergh?
Mine goes Traffic, Contagion, Solaris, Magic Mike, and No Sudden Move. What do you have?
I've got The Limey, Out of Sight, Traffic, Magic Mike, Solaris.
Your top 3 before 2000 or before.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But I didn't see Magic Mike when it came out in 2012 because I was just like, Soderbergh, what's going on with you? But then, yeah, I watched it on streaming like maybe 3 years ago, and I was just like, whoa, this is actually. And once again, though, like I think and I don't know, maybe I'm just like spitballing here, but the combination of like Soderbergh's proficiency with like the undeniable like intense charm of Channing Tatum was a big deal, and the fact that like he hadn't directed Channing Tatum prior to that, and like he was this kind of up and coming like really huge rising star, and I think that was really special. And I don't know if he's really done that because he keeps coming back to this old well of collaborating with the people from the Ocean's movies or the people from Traffic or the people like, I don't know. It's I think that there's things for Soderbergh to do, but it just totally depends on if it happens to align with whatever, itch he wants to scratch at any given moment. Because he doesn't want to make like, he thinks so little, I feel, of the audience.
Remember he did the Oscars?
He just cares about the craft.
He did the year's Oscars? Like, what was that about?
Yeah, I don't know. Why would he take that job?
I think he's just like, he's one of those guys who just wants a constant challenge. He likes to put himself in like a terrible situation always and tries to get himself out of it. Well, the Oscars, he didn't get himself out of it. It was terrible. Awful. Yeah. What do we have coming up next week in episode 6 of season 4? An old movie. What do we got?
Yes, our oldest movie yet. But I'm a sucker for it. It's one of my favorite films of all time. It's the 40th anniversary this year of John Landis's horror comedy An American Werewolf in London, and it's new to streaming on Shudder this month. So definitely, if you are a horror fan and you've never tried Shudder, I can't recommend it enough. Awesome. And this will be a really fun one to go back and talk about and see what history we can dig up on the internet for a movie from 1981.
I've never seen it, by the way.
What? Oh my God, you're in for a treat.
All right. Thanks for listening, folks. This has been Film Trace.